Welcome to Inaudible. My name is Jeremy Weiland, and I'm joined by my co host, Nithin Reddy. On this podcast, we discuss the weird, beautiful channeled messages found in the long tradition of Confederation channeling, philosophy, and seeking, articulating a philosophy of spiritual evolution known as the Law of One. Many of these messages are available to listen to on our sister podcast, Living, Love, and Light, available on all platforms. We seek to provide analysis and commentary on this Law of One philosophy described in these messages, identifying the common themes and grappling with the application of this information to our human lives. However, we are not counselors, gurus, or experts of any kind, so please evaluate our words in light of our shortcomings and use your own best judgment. Thanks for joining us. And Nithin, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
Good morning, man. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm okay. I know it's been a long time since we've really been able to chill. You've been busy as crap, trying to get a house ready for habitation. I've been busy just dealing with the with work, with getting ready for the intensive in November, and just the various things going on when you have two beagles that aren't in best health right now. So
Yeah,
it could be a
just
lot worse. So
just the standard ebb and flow of life, you know.
yeah. Gotcha. Well, Dithin is accommodating me because I'm in a bit of a time crunch. I have to be at a gig in like 3 hours. So I did want to take this opportunity. Thank you so much for joining, Nithin, because I know how busy you are. I really wanted you to be on this episode because I wanted to basically continue the conversation that we had last time and take it from the first three distortions of free will, love, and light, and this kind of more nuanced understanding of these concepts, and then extend them into the concepts of desire and service. So, just to recap the session that we dealt with last time, this was February 11th, 1974. And I'm going to be bringing in a bunch of stuff from the 70s. I'm not going to be bringing in much raw, at least I don't anticipate doing that. Because a lot of these short channeled sessions from the mid 70s really reinforce each other conceptually, definitionally, what have you. And it really paints an interesting picture of how all of these things that we ascribe kind of moral functions to actually have these natural functions that are intimately bound up in what we sort of consider to be moral or ethical or what have you. Things like service, things like desire. So, just to recap the big points from last session, that was February 11th, 1974. They were describing how the Creator's love causes vibrations. This is the basis for light particles and the entire illusion. Love creates the vibration, light is what is produced from that vibration. So, this illusion that is created out of that is where it has a function. Its function is to help us experience what we desire. This is a very important concept to understand because otherwise, it will not be clear what we're trying to get at in this session, in this episode, which is what desire and service mean. So, anyway, the illusion is the arena in which we experience desire. Love is the ideal way to produce what we desire. In other words, our original desire, our desire that is in us because of our patrimony with the Creator, is all about love. It's all about this basic desire for unity, and service being this kind of way in which this unity expresses itself in the motion filled dynamic of separate things that seems to be this illusion. But it's actually all one thing. So service is kind of like what oneness looks like when it's kind of like the view is slightly tilted. And another thing that they said is that Jesus demonstrated these principles in his life and works, that he was able to do miracles. He was able to reach people because he went first with love, and he used that love to manifest into the illusion what his true desire was. Now, what separates Jesus' desire from ours? This is something that I really want to dive into today, and it also is something we're going to be looking at with respect to what do Confederation entities understand as their desire, and how does that relate to what we desire. So the session that we are doing today is from 2 days later, February 13th, 1974. Um, and I don't know, let's just jump right in. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about, Nithin?
No, I love the topic. It's there's a lot going on, and yeah, let's just dive right in.
Right on. All right, so here's Hatonn, February 13th, 1974. I'm going to jump over the niceties. We would prefer to speak with all of the people of this planet. However, there are many who would wish not to hear us. They would, they would not wish to know us. And they would not understand anything that we said, even though, my friends, we are able at this time to use fluently any of your languages. It takes a considerable amount of time, as you know it, to establish a base for communication when the concept from which we generate ideas is as largely displaced from yours as ours. I want to stop right there. This right here, what they just said, to me is the basic function of conscious channeling. The entire value is to give us who live in this very limited, corralled, narrow illusion, and we have these narrow thoughts because our thinking has conformed to our society. It's conformed to the preconceptions and the narrow confines of what's acceptable to think and what's not acceptable to think. So they are simply providing a completely different perspective than what we're used to. And they spent a lot of time, it seems like, through the UFO process of the earlier parts of the 20th century in trying to figure out how to communicate with us, how to actually express this intellectually when what they really want to talk about isn't intellectual at all. But they have to meet us where we're at. And so this has been always the problem. How do we express the simplicity of what we want to communicate in a way that you will actually hear? And this is a problem that all teachers have faced throughout the ages with spiritual issues. I'm reading right now about the pre-Socratic philosopher Empedocles and how he would lament that he would just lay it out in front of people, like the truth of oneness, and they just wouldn't see it. They just looked right past it. You know what I mean? Like they're not. It's not just about being exposed to the information. It's you have to go through a transformation yourself. And so they are at once trying to inspire us to make this transformation and also give us information we need in order to see that transformation through. So it's kind of a duple basis for communication that they're talking about. To continue, when I say yours, Hatonn means when the concept from which we generate ideas is as largely displaced from yours as is ours. So when they say yours, I'm speaking of the general basis for concepts of the majority of the people on your planet, right? So they're just saying this alienation between their basis for communication, their basis for the ideas they wish to speak, and ours is something that's a function of the planet. It's planetary wide. This is social. This is part of the stuff, the yellow ray stuff, that we are not authors of. We are kind of subject to it by being in this incarnation on this planet. So they are talking right now about the basis for communication between their planet and ours. So Hatonn continues. The bases for our concept are what we consider universal truths, truths that are unchanging, and that are the reason for the creation that is all about us and is us and you. Unfortunately, the people of the planet upon which you presently dwell are not aware of the truth behind the functioning of the creation in which they find themselves. This is not an abnormal situation, but it is not normal either. There are many other peoples throughout the creation who are not aware of these truths. However, there are a very, very large number who are. There are a certain percentage of the people within your population who are ready to be instructed, for they have reached a state of understanding so that they may easily assimilate the little more knowledge that they need in order to understand the truth of the functioning of this creation. All right. So Hatonn is saying we come from a place more of universal truths. And this is kind of like part of the reason why when we speak, it kind of doesn't always hit with y'all. We are trying to change that. It's not an abnormal situation, it's not unheard of, but it also is not the basis, it's not the situation for everybody in the universe. And there are certain people on our planet who are ready to hear. And this, remember, this happened 50 years ago, this session. So hopefully more people are ready now.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
I think there are.
Hatonn says, "This is what we are attempting to do at this time. And this evening, we will endeavor to do this so that each of you will be able to make one more stop in your journey towards a complete understanding of truth. Most of the problems that you encounter in understanding this truth have to do with false impressions given to you by the society in which you find yourselves now. If you had been living in a society that had always been aware of truth and of the true nature of the creation, you would have no difficulty in applying the truths, since they would be a part of your life. It is difficult to do this when living in a society that continues to focus its attention on things that are very far from the Creator's plan. The society, as you know it as present, has focused its attention at present on many things. Very, very few of these things that it is interested in have anything at all to do with the basic truth of the functioning of the creation in all of its ways and all of its parts." Just to pause right here, this is a explication of what they were saying earlier. We have part of the reason that we have a hard time understanding the simplicity and the power of the concepts that they're transmitting is that our society has a completely different focus than these truths. And because Hatonn society ostensibly has this focus, they are able to speak from that place of truth much more easily. So we have certain people who are in a process of seeking. We'll get in more into that later. And this is going to orient them more and more towards a desire and a kind of focus on hearing this kind of simpler truth. But this is the situation right now. I think it's important to also point out that like it's not your fault if this stuff doesn't like sink in immediately. If you don't hear it and the angels start singing, you live in a society that has made all of this clear as mud for you. And so it's a personal struggle for everybody to kind of figure out what's important in life and how that relates to more and more of the basic truths of life.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder how much of, kind of like the societal overlay of lessons is like an energetic thing in part. Maybe it's a genetic thing, like the human need for community, right? The desire, and maybe obviously at a certain level, there's distortion involved, right? The desire to feel accepted and wanted and belonging. But it's just interesting because it, you definitely have free will even at an early age, right? Ra talks about that. Even I think they even say some a specific example of like toddlers, and that there's a responsibility for their decisions at some level, what the choices they make. But when you're that age, man, it's obviously two different children, two different toddlers might react differently to rules being given or societal obligations. But I don't know, it doesn't feel as free making those decisions and values. It feels like the freedom maybe comes a little later in life when you have the freedom to question what you're raised with. But some people don't even get to that point where they where they exercise that freedom later in life to question what they've been raised with, So it's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's like you have to get your feet under you. You don't necessarily consciously, you didn't choose to be born on Earth or on planet Hatonn or wherever you're born, right? So you're just trying to get your roots into the ground when you're first incarnated. You have to put your roots down where you incarnated. You can't choose to do that somewhere else. Otherwise, you won't be able to relate to other people within that closed context of the culture. However unspiritual it may be, you still need to be able to talk to other people. You still need mirrors. And that mirroring has to happen in that yellow ray and orange ray context in which you're an individual and you're a social agent.
Right.
It's just part of third density. And I think that there Hatonn shows a lot of compassion for the difficulty of the situation that we're in. Um, I also want to put an emphasis on, the society is uh, not interested, Hatonn says, in anything at all to do with the basic truth of the functioning of the creation in all of its ways and all of its parts. That may seem to be kind of a way of dismissing our scientific endeavors, since we definitely do try to see how all of the creation functions, but I don't think we really do. We like to see how the physical creation functions. And our society is very well adapted towards that, towards figuring out what can be reproduced consistently in nature. What kind of principles can we devise that will predict future events based on what we know? But when they talk about the functioning of the creation in all of its ways and all of its parts, they don't have such a materialistic concept of it. And this is service. This is what we're about to get into. So let's jump into it. Your people on this planet seek many things, Hatonn says. However, they seek these things in what we would consider to be a very strange way. They seek the results of their desires almost exclusively within what they know as the physical illusion that they now enjoy. Since they are unable to experience in their waking state anything but this physical illusion, they then think that this is all that exists, and they attempt to find expression of their desires strictly within this illusion. I want to put this in bold. If people don't think there's anything more than the physical illusion, then all of their desires have to go through that illusion. And that's how they will seek. They will seek the fulfillment of their desires in whatever way the illusion makes it work out. And specifically, the illusion that they're aware of, right? Because there's all sorts of illusions. Now, this is the key part here. Hatonn says, this, seeking your desire within the illusion, this results in the fulfillment of false desires. The people who fulfill these false desires wonder why, having filled them, they do not find happiness. This has been demonstrated upon your planet many times, but little heed has been taken of it. The desires still remain strong, and the people about you strive with much energy to fulfill them. Having fulfilled them, they then, as I have said, wonder. They wonder why they still have desires, for as soon as they have fulfilled one, they have generated another. So, right here, we have the basis for the kind of skewed experience that we have on this planet compared to what those of Hatonn, those of Ra, other Confederation sources, and other teachers have explained is the true nature of our existence and of reality. We desire. Desire is part of the root function of the creator. It is to be a creator is to desire, and it is an expression of the love that the creator has. The problem is that when we try to push that desire that we feel deep inside of us, when we try to fulfill it only through the illusion, we never really are able to get at that core thing that we want to get, that sort of hunger that our desire is expressing. Any thoughts on that, Nithin?
No, I think it's a very important point. The concept of the idea or the recognition of false desires, I think it's not widely discussed. The most confident people in society about what they want, oftentimes there's no disclosure or discussion of the process of going deep and figuring out what they truly desired. It's almost like we're raised with this idea that it's usually and it's self-evident what your desire is. And yes, there's always people who, there's a difficult decision and they're unsure what they want to do, but the idea that that's more framed as there's pros and cons, and it's more of they're not sure because they don't know the probabilities in the outcome, as opposed to there isn't a recognition of not knowing your desire because of an inner lack of understanding. Right. Usually our society, when we talk about we're not sure on our desire, we're talking about externally we're not sure which outcome we're seeking, not about what we want internally. Usually internally it's like, oh, it's understood. Yeah. It's just that how do we achieve that externally? And I think it's super important because we've talked about this in other ways. You know, um, there's surface level desires, and then there's deeper desires. And if you're looking into these spiritual concepts, it's not usually the surface level conscious desire. You might get angry and want to punch someone. Is that the desire that Haton's talking about? No, obviously not. But that's an obvious example, but there's gradations of that concept of false desire. So I think it's a
Yeah.
very important point.
Yeah, and remember that desire to punch is related to the original desire at some
It is.
level. It's just
Absolutely.
heavily, heavily, heavily distorted. And it's because this illusion is where we're supposed to act out these desires. It's supposed to where we're supposed to like work on these desires. But the illusion only gives us certain avenues. And it's going to frustrate those more basic desires. That's what everybody deals with in life. Look at how much pain and suffering and aggression and all this stuff. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any place to start to build a more sane and loving world. Um, so of course we compromise and we sort of like fit these square pegs into these round holes and try to make do. Instead of letting that lack of fulfillment that the illusion is affording us turn us inward and say, well, are there other desires I have, or are there roots of the desire I'm aware of now that might be in the sense that they are maybe a little bit more abstract, that they're more ephemeral and philosophical. Therefore, they don't have a concrete thing out in the illusion that I'm thinking of as, well, that's what it means for that desire to be fulfilled. It is more in the moment, and it's more something that you may not understand how it gets fulfilled, but you still act on your desire to love, to serve, all these things. And then somehow you're fulfilled, even in spite of the fact that you didn't figure out what you wanted exactly, right? Okay.
Yes, there's definitely a bit of I feel like trial and error and experimentation to the process, at least where we're
Yeah,
situated here on Earth.
I think that's what the illusion is too. It also allows for lots of false fulfillments of desires because that's kind of how we learn, right?
Sadly, yes, and
Eh,
maybe not so sad. It's just part of the plan, right?
you can be sad
It's
if you want. It's okay.
it's fun too. It's come on, it's fun too.
All right, let's move on. So Hatonn says, we are going to attempt to give you instruction at this time on the proper use of desires so that you may work with the truth of the creation and become once more knowledgeable about its function. There are certain desires that every individual has within him. These desires are a natural state and they should be fulfilled. The reason that the individual has these natural desires is that he is a part of the creation, and the Creator had an original desire, which continues throughout all time and all of space. The desire of the Creator was to provide an experience for all of His parts that would fulfill in totality the desire of all of His parts. But since all of His parts have this same desire, then it should be evident that this desire is to serve the other parts. This is how we have interpreted the functioning of the creation. This is why within each individual throughout all of the creation, there dwells a desire to serve the creation in any way that he can. This dwells within each of the people, all of the entities of this planet, for all of them are a portion of the Creator. All right, another pause, but notice this whole idea of desire is built into every single unit fractally of the creator. And so service is the way that all of these desires are fulfilled one piece to another, right? Like if you're in first density, desire is that desire to, achieve awareness and have an experience of the upward spiraling light. If you're in second density, the desire is to survive. All of these things are projections of that original desire into the confines and characteristics of the illusion that you find yourself in at the level of consciousness in which you're having the experience to begin with. But the point is that service is not some special thing that people like you and I do, or entities like Hatonn and Ra do. Service is something that is universal across the entire creation. And like I said, the way that I think about it is that it is the kinetic of unity, where the potential of unity is just everything being one big continuum. When we want to look at it as not one big continuum, but as a bunch of separate things, it's all going to be emotion, it's all going to be relating in this way and that way. But all of those ways of relating are a form of service. And our service that we perform with our behavior and with our intentions is simply a more focused, a more refined version of what is going on throughout the creation at every single level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Ra has talked about this as well. That
Yep.
basically everything we do is service in some fashion, and it's just a question of how directed the seeking is towards service to self, service to others, and the nature of the service.
Yep. All right. So moving along. So we're starting to get in the service, but we're really focused on desire right now. I'm probably getting us ahead of the ball. I'm sorry. Anyway, Hatonn continues. It is possible to fulfill this desire that they just described everything in the universe having, including us. It is possible to fulfill this desire. As we have said, the Creator has attempted to provide only good for all of his children. But since all of his children are a part of the Creator, and since all of us and everything is in actuality one thing, then we have this necessity occurring within each individual in all of the parts of the creation, an attempt to serve. This is natural. The planet upon which you now stand serves you. The growth that comes from the planet serves you. Its atmosphere serves you. Its water serves you. The entire creation serves you. You feel the energy from your sun. It serves you. This is what I was explaining earlier. It's like whether we go to the natural world, where we want to go to the highly refined metaphysical world, at every level, service might look different, but it is uh, something that is always going on because it's kind of like one of the ways I think of it is service kind of fills in the gaps that seem uh, to separate one thing from another. That service is kind of like the truth that they're actually one. They're in this sort of like dyadic relationship with each other, and everything has this dyadic relationship with everything else. So everything is in relation to each other. It all serves each other, and it's just a matter of what that service is at the level of consciousness we're observing it, and it is manifesting.
Yeah, and I think at least when I think about service in this kind of continuum, it reminds me of a quote from Roth about that third density is not the density of understanding. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the service that we might see, it might not be readily apparent how, that is a service, right? Like, for example, if you talk about um, just whatever natural disasters where a lot of people die, it's hard to understand. And I don't think you have to understand it, right? It's not meant that everything can be immediately understood in third density. And I think that's part of it is that even though at some level we know that this is service, it's also okay to not understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it, all most. It seems to me like most of the things in creation don't need to understand in order to serve. The
Right.
My table does not need to understand what I'm doing in order to serve as a surface for me to work upon, to record
I
this
love that
podcast.
example. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to understand why my coworker is having a bad day in order to try to give them some encouragement or to,
Right.
give them a kind word. Uh, Sometimes there we do get insight sometimes, but I think it's important to recognize that that insight is always going to be very unique to the moment, very particular to what's going on, what our consciousness was at, what their consciousness, the other people were at. Like it's just you're just trying to feel this out, and Hatan is going to give us some tips for how we can better sort of figure out what service is and try to do it in a way that isn't relying totally on the intellect. Because, of course, if we make it all intellectual, then it's just going to be this big calculation we're doing, right? And as I think I've said before, we're not living in a math problem. We're living in a creation, right? Where everything is in this uh, symbiotic relationship with everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Uh, let's see. Okay, so we're talking about all the things in nature that serve you. Hatonn continues. This principle is simply the original concept of the Creator being expressed through all of its parts. For this concept remains undiminished. For this reason, you will find that you will achieve what you actually desire only if you are to serve the rest of the creation. I'm going to repeat that. For this reason, you will find that you will achieve what you actually desire only if you are to serve the rest of the creation. This is a law that is natural. This law is the creation. This creation, to build upon what Hatonn is saying, is a setting for us to fulfill our desires through service. Hatonn has said many times, they desire to serve us, and they come to us because it is their desire. They also know that we desire it, and that's why it actually counts as service too. We're going to get into that other side of service. But it's important to understand that it is through service that we fulfill our desires, that we satiate that unquenchable thirst for something we can't put our finger on what. And service is a very, very broad category of things. But it's important to have that truth in our minds as we go forward here.
Absolutely.
Hatonn continues. The people of the Confederation of the planets in the service of the infinite creator are just that. We are in his service, but we are in our service, and we are in your service, and we are in the creation service. For we have recognized that in being a part of the Creator and having within us the expression that was originally generated, it is only possible to fulfill desire through service. For this reason, we are here now to give to you our service. This fulfills our desire. This fulfills the Creator's desire. The entire process is simplicity itself. Another way of expressing what they're trying to say is, it's all service in different forms. And the more that you can see through the details to the underlying love, the underlying light, the underlying desire, and the underlying manifestation that is service, the more that you will see into these things that are going on. And you will be able to love them and reach them on that deeper level at your deeper desire and serve them on that deeper level. And my friends, this is the creation, Hatonn continues. Simplicity. It is only necessary that you understand this, and then act in such a way as to carry out your desire in its true sense, for you to once more unite in totality with the original and true creation. I think it's important to recognize, I think we were talking about last episode, that there's a very, very important part of love and light, which is when you learn these things, you have to put them into practice. If you don't put these things into practice in the illusion, then it doesn't really take. We don't really learn the lesson. The illusion is the setting for us to express these things. We are expressing the deepest love that we have, our deepest concept of service, into the illusion. And this is the simplicity of everything. We have put a lot of details, we make it very complicated. But underneath, the dynamics are very simple. Now, how are we
Yeah,
to
there.
understand? Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, there's. It's interesting that sometimes the way reality is set up at a very basic level, or at least my perception of it, is very intuitive and makes sense. And then other times, it's almost as if there's these hard to comprehend processes at play. And one of those that I find very interesting is how there's a Ra talks about that every moment of seeking when you're you point the needle, so to speak, and you choose service to others, it creates a momentum, and that's absolutely true. But the momentum is built both internally and externally, right? So you change internally And there's not necessarily one order. It's not like you change internally and then you express it externally. It can happen the other way around. I would say often early in our journey it happens the other way around. Something happens externally that prompts internal change. But what's key is there's some sort of almost like interaction between the external and internal, that if you are able to embrace both, it builds momentum on the path much more so. I think you still can progress because nothing is truly internal. We exist here as beings. So, having beliefs and choices and distortions, they've done studies on this, right? Having anger creates physical hormones in your body. So there's always a basic interaction between the internal and external, even if you're just sitting in meditation. So I do think, for if you are drawn to the path of monkhood, or for lack of a better term, and meditating, you can absolutely seek that way. But what I've also found is that both working on internal alchemy, so to speak, and then also practicing it externally, it creates an enormous amount of momentum that is just amazing to see.
Yeah. This is what I think Monka has been talking about when they talk about this bi-directional mirroring that's going on in our experience, that the outer illusion mirrors back to us, but the inner illusion also mirrors back to us. And when we don't feel that we can work with that outer illusion, we always have an inner illusion that we can work with, and vice versa. When we can't work something out within ourselves, well, there's the outer illusion in which we can play out things in this greater sense. Yeah, I think that's a very important. And where are we? We are the center. We are this fulcrum between these two bands of projection going on, and we are constantly switching between them. But I think
Yeah.
that's what it means when Ross says that infinity has a center, and everything is a center to the extent that it's an entity. It is fractally recapitulating the fact that there's only one center in reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so a lot of what growth, spiritual growth involves is sort of understanding these principles, these features of our experience and how to use them. There does seem to be, like in most new age or spiritual areas of study, it seems to be very much about like this kind of story of coming back into the creator and doing it through faith and love, and just realizing that there's nothing that you can do, that it really is out of your control, that everything is one, and therefore it's not really about you per se. It's about just accepting this oneness. But I will say that there also does seem to be, with self-conscious entities, a need to develop a kind of skill, or maybe several different types of skill. This kind of skill of being able to see through things, to the deeper things that are going on, to recognize that we are in an illusion, right? It is an illusion. It's all an illusion. What we're doing right now is an illusion, but it serves a purpose. It's one thing for an illusion to just be something designed completely to trick you. That's just a way to deceive you. But an illusion can also be a way in which, by the very fact that it's illusory, it's sort of reflecting back to you like what isn't, and that helps you dial down what is, right? I don't know. I don't feel I'm putting a really fine point
No,
on
no,
that.
I think it makes sense. I think a lot of some new age circles, it's all, and frankly even some interpretations of religion, it's like a rejection, an outright rejection of the the illusion in general.
Yeah.
Now, I maybe I shouldn't use the word rejection, but it's judgment on on condemnation of the illusion, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can be, there's important distinctions to make, because look, it's totally understandable if you want to, in my opinion, say, hey, the way we're doing things in the the most materialistic forms of Western society, maybe that's something we should move away from. But putting that and throwing out the idea of the illusion being just having a household, raising a family, just working a job and I'm not saying like a crazy job, but just like earning a living, right? there's some just basic things that have existed all throughout human society, even before capitalism, right? Even before we settled into cities, when we were hunter gatherers, we still had some sort of work to do. And I'm not saying that work is good or bad, but it's sometimes I feel like people they maybe they awaken from the illusion and they recognize certain aspects of society is very maybe distorted, and then they kind of throw out the baby out with the bathwater. There's a reason that we there's an illusion. Period. There's a reason there's an illusion, and that it's not all just internal alchemy and that we can interact in this physical form, right? And I think it's important if you want to accept all of reality, accept all of creation, which look, there's no shoulds. You don't have to, but
Yeah.
if you know there's some paths that are maybe more direct to the creator, right? More undistorted. And I think coming to terms in a natural and organic sense, because I think, look, it's totally understandable to sit here and go, how is this world so distorted? How is there so much natural disaster, natural evil? How is there so much human caused evil, right? The war in the Middle East. It's these are legitimate questions to ask. These are not things that should be hand waved away. But at the same time, it can be useful to find a place where you come to an acceptance of that. And acceptance doesn't mean inaction, it just means that you allow it to exist at some level, because the creator, and when I say allow it to exist, I'm talking about you give it space emotionally, and don't, I guess, you learn to understand that you don't have to understand why it occurs. It's still part of the process.
Hmm. Yeah. A lot of times when we try to like understand why something happens, it's almost like this petulant way of saying, like, well, I don't have to accept it because it doesn't have a good reason for existing. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
nah, existence is its own argument. You know, like it
And
doesn't need more justification than the fact that it's present.
yeah, and I look, I will say one thing that and I found this true for myself as well, that I think often when you first awaken, discernment's hard. And I early on in my journey, you kind of, when you're learning discernment, you kind of see something that worked for someone, and often it's one thing to try out a spiritual path that worked for someone, right? Like meditating for months on end, like Buddha did under a tree. But it's another thing to say this is the primary or only way to which to get there, right? So, for example, if there is some person, I think there are people who maybe don't reject the illusion, but are called to that monk-like existence to live in the Himalayas, right? And
Sure.
that's fine if they're genuinely there. But to say that is the main path, or should be the main path, it kind of creates this kind of rejection of the illusion, because that's just one person's chosen way of interacting, right?
Hmm.
Of exploring things.
Yep. All right, let's move along. Uh, let's see. Okay, so they're talking about the simplicity of all things serving other things because all desires are the creator's desire, and this service is how that's expressed in the illusion. Hatonn continues. We have stated many times that meditation is very necessary. If you are to understand what and how to serve at this time, it is necessary that you find this through meditation, for this is the only process that will allow you to understand in its totality this information. So it is necessary that you spend time each day in meditation and become aware of the technique of fulfilling your desire to serve. When you have done this, you will find that you are experiencing something that is phenomenal. It will be an event that is beyond your wildest dreams. It will be of a nature that you might consider impossible at this time, but it will take place. Many of the people of this planet are serving at this time. They serve in many different ways. However, only a small percentage of them are actually fulfilling their desire to serve. For what I will call blind service is not as effective as service that is performed as a result of the knowledge gained in meditation. Now, this seems to get us into an area where where understanding starts to become something that we could hope to have. And I don't think they mean understanding in the same way that Ross said understanding is not of this density. I think what they mean is that, well, later on they talk about how it's not service if it's not requested. But because people don't understand their real desires, their true desires, they're not necessarily always like clearly requesting what they actually want. They're requesting instead what they think they want. And so it is in meditation and understanding, the only way that I can really think about this, Nithin, is that in meditation, we discover our own deeper desires, we sort of see into the greater reality of our own existence. And somehow this must confer some ability to see into the greater, deeper desires and deeper existence in others as well. That's the only way I can think of it, because if service is not simply giving people what they ask for in the illusion up front, then it must rely on some other way of discovering what it is to be done, right? How do you understand this?
Yeah, I mean, if you your ability to perceive yourself is also the same lens by which you perceive others, right?
Yeah.
So the ability to go deep in meditation, to understand yourself, is really part and parcel of truly seeing others as much as they can be seen in this illusion. Um, that being said, I wanted to ask you a question. I have my answer or my proposed answer, but it's a when you're talking about many of these concepts, there's sometimes a seemingly contradiction. So, for example,
Okay.
we've talked about that everything is service, but
Yeah.
then there's also the concept that if you do something that someone isn't truly requesting it, that isn't service. So how do you reconcile
Yeah.
those two
So
things?
so because here's the thing, and I run into this a lot with the Greek philosophers that I've been reading lately too. When you're talking at this level, it is so simple that a lot of our complicated thinking doesn't fit into it really well. In one sense, everything is service, even infringement.
Absolutely.
In another sense, when we say service, what we really mean is I want to express that love from that deepest level I have, that desire from that deepest level, not from a surface level. And it is acting from the surface level desire, the surface level concept of love, trying to calculate intellectually and cerebrally what to be done, and making assumptions about other people intellectually that then sort of guide that. Um, that is one way of doing it, and you're going to run continually into problems with that. Uh, it seems to me that there is some sort of greater identity you need to be able to tap into, so that it's not just always Jeremy, a third density person who's a U.S. citizen in Virginia, who has this job, who has this wife, all of these settings that then seem to tell us exactly what service is in that situation. We need to be able to sort of like take a broader view than that. Um, is this addressing what you're saying?
Yeah. I basically in agreement. I think that there's gradations of service, specifically when Hatonn talks about, however, only a small percentage of them are actually fulfilling their desire to serve. For what I will call blind service is not as effective as service that is performed as a result of
Yeah.
knowledge gained in meditation. And I think another way to view it is the service. Sometimes we're referring to the service in the most pure form, which in third density would be service to others. Presumably, also there's an argument to be made service to self at least there's a certain purity to that of a different nature. But I think yeah, they're basically talking about even though everything is service, in terms of service that yields growth, there's more effective, uh, pure forms of service that yield growth.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's all service. How distorted is it? Where
Right.
is it coming from? Like our conscious awareness has the ability to intend on multiple levels. And so I
Exactly.
think I think as we become more sophisticated as co-creators with this self-awareness that we've been gifted in third density, we learn how to meet people at the basic level of the society in which we live, right? Or the interpersonal relationship that we have. But then we also understand that that's a setting for deeper things too, for lots of other ways of thinking about the situation as well. And we don't have to pick one. When we give somebody, when we help an old lady across the street, we're doing it for the surface level. We want to be nice to the person and show respect and care. But then we also understand that this reflects the service that we've been rendered in our lives. It reflects the it reflects one creator honoring another creator, right? And as we go deeper and deeper and peel off these layers of film that represent where our consciousness descended to at a certain point, right? So we're peeling them away slowly and moving higher and higher, or maybe deeper and deeper, I should say. See, I already contradict myself. All of these things are going to contradict themselves because they're limited concepts trying to express the ineffable, the abstract. So we should expect contradiction. We should expect that when they use the words that conform to our very superficial understanding of service and desire, that of course those words are going to lead us into blind alleys or blind corners and dark alleys because yeah, like these words aren't designed for the kind of understanding of basic truth that Hatonn society, for example, has been able to establish.
Yeah, I
Their
mean, when
way
you're
of
speaking,
their way of expressing themselves is much simpler and directer because they have a society that reinforces that for them.
yeah, I mean, we're basically talking about infinities, and I think also this is why, even if you quote lay it out in words for someone who's not ready or is willing or open, it's difficult because the idea that there's more to reality than that which you can express in words is not a very familiar concept to a lot of people.
Mm-mm.
And really, when you're dealing with the spiritual concepts, you can try and kind of point to them, in part with words, but it doesn't fully capture them. The only reason we're able to have this conversation is because we're open and curious, but we also we seek at the edges of these words internally in meditation, externally in our personal lives, and we put into practice some of the concepts that are very difficult to describe. And that's how you get closer to the truth because these concepts are not they're not, you can't capture them by language fully.
And as intellectual entities, we want to capture them. We want to sum them up, say, all right, now we understand this thing. We can put it on the shelf. It's understood. We never have to deal with it again. No, no, these things grow. They aren't able to be just consolidated into a simple concept that we can slap a label on and move on with our lives. We have to deepen and explore them. And there's these different nuances and edges to them that have to be appreciated. And that is something that the intellect will be very frustrated if that is your only tool for realizing it. It's especially difficult to expect the intellect to figure out surface when it has to go on a kind of intuition about what people are asking for because they aren't being expressed about what they want, right? Their deeper desire. So this is all still a mystery, and it's all something that it's not easy, but the idea is that if we're going to do it, if we're going to seek to serve, then we know, at least from Hatonn's point of view, where we should kind of be leaning. We should be leaning away from an intellectual sort of left brain understanding of the world and start to lean more into those kinds of aspects of ourselves that come out in meditation. This is the self, this is the side of ourself that we are introducing ourselves to when we sit on the cushion and we close our eyes and we start to, dial down the thoughts, right? And just be who we are. This is the side of ourselves where we don't have to understand how that impulse to do this or this sudden craving to call that person or to text that person or to give someone $1 or whatever it is. Like we don't have to explain that to ourselves. We don't have to have a chain of reasoning that then we critique, right? That's one way to do it, but it's not the only way. And the more that we afford ourselves many, many different ways of approaching things, many, many different perspectives, the more that we can use this information that the Confederation gives us. Since, after all, like I said from the very beginning, all of this information arises from simply taking a different perspective than we're used to taking on Earth.
Well said. Well said.
All right. So let's say meditation is necessary. And I didn't really understand the when you have done this, when you have spent time in meditation to figure out what you desire and to put that into service, when you have done this, you will find that you are experiencing something that is phenomenal. It will be an event that is beyond your wildest dreams. It will be of a nature that you might consider impossible at this time, but it will take place. I mean, it sounds like they're almost gesturing towards what they were describing Jesus as performing in the last session we talked about, which is miracles. I don't understand how else to. Do they just mean an awakening there? Do they just mean like a sense of connectedness? I think probably all of it and something more
Yeah,
as well
that
that
was
I'm
my
not getting
interpretation.
to. Yeah.
Is like an awakening, but it could also mean like miracles. Um, just I don't know, just the initial awakening, but you also have periodic reawakenings where you just like see so clearly, just for a brief moment through the illusion and veil. It just you feel the ecstasy of creation. Maybe that's what they're referring to.
Yeah. There was something in the last Richmond session that sounded like this. Um, yeah.
I think there's something
Oh,
to
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. You can reach out. Orcus said you can reach out and place your hands on their shoulder. Nah, I don't think this really fits. Never mind. I'll cut
No,
that
no,
out.
let's hear it because normally I don't comment on this, but I'm I'm I got okay sleep, but so what I'm about to describe might just be my slight sleep deprivation, but no, as we're talking about the subject, I feel a massive amount of energy entering my crown. So what were you about to say about Orcus?
Okay. As this instrument has, okay, it is a dedication to the fool's path across the chasm. And if one falls, one picks oneself up, one dusts off the pants, and one gives it another go. As this instrument has read in the words of she who is named Pema, if you never give up on yourself, you will learn how to never give up on others, and then it is not all on your shoulders in the first place. The protean entity that is experiencing itself through you can more and more be identified with through the gleam of love in your sister's eye, in the stout heart that's conveyed by your brother. You can reach out and place your hands on their shoulders and look in their eyes and know that you are one, that this is one seeking path, that this is one creator that you are all a part of. And you can have that sublime experience where the illusion melts away for a tiny fraction of an instant. And this can provide the inspiration for years and years of seeking in common. That's what it reminded me of, is like these little like breakthroughs that we have. And I don't know about you. I've had it before. Um, it feels amazing at the time, and then memory kind of sometimes can fade away, like the real impact it had. But there are times where you just find yourself thinking, or you find yourself all of a sudden you're like, where am I? What am I doing? Like you realize that you are you, even when you have alienated yourself through your thinking from all of this stuff going on. And you suddenly realize, but my center's still there. I'm not thinking, I'm not acting, and yet I exist. And
Yeah,
everyone else has this too. What I'm experiencing is everybody else's experience on some level as well.
yeah.
All right, I shoehorned that in pretty well. Let's go ahead and take this over the line. So, we're talking about the necessity of meditation in order to aid in this ability to convey one's desires from the potential into the kinetic via service, via this projection of unity into the dynamic of the separate illusion. Hatonn continues, it is important then to learn how to serve and whom should be served. As I've said, it would seem that we would perform a service by coming among your people and helping. Our meditation reveals to us that this is erroneous. For this reason, we contact you in this way through channeling. We request that you do as we do if you are to know how to serve and whom should be served at this time. Meditate, for this knowledge is within all people throughout the creation, for they are the creation, and this is his desire to serve all of his parts, so that each experience the ecstasy that he originally created and that exists all about you. Okay, so we have another hint that there is this like ecstatic experience involved in the proper uh, 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 performance of service. All right, so I'm going to skip over some of the niceties of changing instruments. And let's see. This is the last part of the session. I am Hatonn. I greet you in the love and the light of our infinite creator. I would attempt to speak on a subject of interest. The subject is love. This is a subject that is necessary to understand if you are to be effective in fulfilling your desire of service. In serving your fellow man upon earth, it is necessary to give him love. This is sometimes difficult to do in your present society, for these expressions are often misunderstood. Love is very misunderstood among your people. We express total love for all of your people. We cannot help doing this, for we express total love for all of the creation. It is impossible to do otherwise when you are aware of the love expressed by the creation. In order to achieve this awareness, it is only necessary to meditate and then to serve. For with each service effectively performed, love will be reflected. This will generate within you more love, and the process will be repeated or recycled. This process will be self-generating and will continue to build. This is what occurred with the teacher you are most familiar with, the one known as Jesus. Why was this man much more effective in generating this love than others who have attempted this recently? The reason, my friends, is that he was able to fulfill his desire for service intelligently. He was able to do this in an intelligent manner because he sought answers to the questions of how to fulfill his desire for service through meditation. All right, maybe that's a good place to take a break. So it's important to recognize that the expression of love is very, very key to this desire that we're seeking to manifest via service. Um, let's see, and that this is a like self-generating process, like they say. It's like a feedback loop. The more that you serve with love, the more effectively and purely you convey this love into service through the medium of your desire. Uh, this reflection of love will then generate within you more love. It's almost like when we serve in the outer illusion, we are using it as kind of like a backdrop, like a screen upon which to see our own love. And the more that we see that love in the universe, in the outer illusion, the more it draws it out within us. I mean, that's probably how it works with service to other people too. The more that we serve them, the more that they see love reflected in the illusion, and it draws love out of them.
Absolutely. I have to apologize because I have a very mundane question that is
Sure.
that I feel like I'm just curious because I don't know much about Christianity. Is the concept of or the idea that Jesus meditated, is that controversial? Is that accepted? And you don't have to
Probably.
describe as meditation, but is there stories? I'm getting through the Bible, but I'm still at the Old Testament. Are there stories of him sitting quietly, like even if they don't say it's meditation, quote unquote, or
Yeah, I
is
think
that
a lot of the times where he goes to pray, he goes on his
okay?
own to pray alone.
Okay,
Uh, I think that would be probably they just didn't have a word for meditation back then, but that would be what they had meant. Um, yeah. For example, the wandering alone in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. I think that was him. That would be, I think, going into like that's very similar to a monk going climbing a mountain because his
right.
guru asked him to go up there and meditate in a shack uh, in sub-zero temperatures for like a month or something. Yeah,
I love the extremes. Yeah.
well, the idea is that you put yourself in the situation where you get to dive very, very deeply within.
Right.
And then you come out and you give that, whatever you found within, you give it expression, right? You give it expression. Finding it within has stirred within you a desire, a way to take what you found within and to see it reflected without. Maybe there's even a mechanism here that, like, our desire secretly wishes to project out something pure that will continue to draw out of us what we are seeking within, right? There's something about, like, we find it within, but it doesn't stay within. It then has to have its expression without. Excuse me. Then, having been expressed without, there's this principle of reflection. We express it without, we project it, and then we see it reflected, and then that takes us back inward again. And we go in and
You-
we find more.
You're spitting some fifth density concepts here, man.
Uh, yeah, I guess so. I like, so like what I am doing, listeners, is I am trying to use intellectual language to work with the simplicity of the system. There are many ways that if you listen to what I said and picked it apart, you could find lots of different conundrums, paradoxes, contradictions in what I say. I mean, there's contradictions in everything. So if you want to find contradiction, if you want to find uh, all the ways in which the equations don't balance, the world's your oyster. Um, However, I think what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to align the intellect and use it as a tool rather than as the sole basis for my reasoning. The reasoning is assisting me in bringing into my consciousness something that I feel deeply, but that doesn't necessarily have a fine point placed upon it. And I think that is, and I've read this elsewhere, that is the proper use of the intellect as a heuristic for helping you understand what you feel.
I'm in agreement, and this discussion reminds me of that. I forget what the psychological concept is, but when you're looking for something, you find examples of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for red cars, you see more red cars than if you weren't looking for it, right? They've done studies showing a person a picture and telling them to look for something, and then asking
Selection
about a different.
bias or something.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But at a deeper level, in a certain sense, there is a consensus reality. But I think the nature of our reality and the infinities involved and free will is such that reality is set up so that people can have their own different sub realities, right? I mean, people talk about it in a very judgmental way when it comes to political realities, but
Yeah.
I think at a deeper level, this reality is set up so that two people, even if they're living close to one another, can have very different experiences by the virtue of their beliefs and their actions and what their local reality mirrors back to them.
Yep.
You know?
Imagine that. Imagine two people whose thinking and maybe their experiences and their biases, even at a root level, make them very difficult for one to relate to the other directly. And so, what do they have? They have this illusion between them, this illusion that allows them to be in that place and the other to be in their place. And through this illusion, through the way that it reflects things back to each other, it kind of winnows away all of the things that are distortions of what's unique among them. It calls it out. It calls out all the ways in which they are not in alignment. That's true. But and if that were all that there were to it, then that would just be a recipe for conflict and endless misunderstanding. But no, that's not all there is to it. It's that each of these misunderstandings, each of these confrontations can also be an opportunity to peel back the layers of the superficial, to peel back those things that we have glommed on ourselves to adopt to what we think is expected of us, to realize what we think our desire is. And all of that, even those painful experiences, give us opportunities to remove those things and to get back to something more pure within ourselves. And as we're doing that, we're also reaching the level at which we can reach something more pure in the other.
Absolutely.
So if you think that the illusion is designed just to do what it seems to be doing outwardly, then yeah, it's all a recipe for conflict and hardship. But the bottom line is that that's just our perspective at a given time. And because we can change our perspective, because we have that creative, that core creative capability to change the way that we look at, to start focusing on this rather than that, to seek out this rather than that, to find something within ourselves and then go out into the illusion and find its best reflections, right? We have this choice. We can also find things in ourselves that are false, and we can go out in the illusion and find reflections of that falsity, you know? Um, the difference being, however, is that those things will tend to frustrate us. And eventually that frustration will lead us to look for the things that are real, not the things that are not real. All right, let's take this home. So Hatonn concludes. Many of those upon your planet who seek to serve their fellow man at present seek to serve him in ways that they have learned intellectually from others or from readings. And they find in many cases difficulties in performing the service that they so much desire to give. And the love that they desire and expect as a return for their service is not reflected, for the service that they have attempted is not desired, and is therefore not a service. A service is only a service if it is desired. Man has free will. He is free to choose anything that he desires. It is necessary, if you are to serve, that you understand the desire of those served, not in an intellectual sense, but in a sense that you gain through meditation, a knowledge that transcends the intellect, a knowledge that results in effective service. I don't think I can make it any clearer than Hatonn did. I don't think that needs any explanation from yours truly.
Yeah, I've definitely found that when I'm, meditation, it provides a knowing that sometimes, because in this reality, a lot of our interactions with people are transactional outside of our friends and family, right?
Yeah.
And we just think, oh, this is just a transactional part of reality. It's just for an income, right, at the job, right?
Yeah.
But then sometimes with a practice of meditation, I've noticed in my personal life, you'll find yourself in situations where you come in contact with a person, and you might not think anything of it because it's a work situation. There's not a lot of catalyst, but sometimes it'll just be blatantly obvious that the reason you're put in contact with this person is for something other than work, right? Like it's for they're going through something that you can relate to. There something, it's a mirroring effect, like they're talking about one of their issues and maybe you don't even open up about your own, but it's just like it's almost like you're working on a concept. Like this is the way it comes up in my reality a lot. You're working on a concept of maybe whatever it is, forgiveness, self-acceptance, and then a person you come into contact with work will talk about something they're going through, and by happen chance it's the exact same, you even share it, it's the exact same thing you're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like this is like a sign. I take it as a sign, right, from the
Yeah.
creator, that it's like highlighting, and then that's an opportunity where you can then also be of service to them, but they're being of service to you in a way that if you just didn't take the extra 5 minutes to talk to them and just purely kept it transactional, you might not have heard that story, right?
Yep. Yep. And this is something that I think that Hatonn actually explicates a little bit in their April 22nd, 1974 session. They have a great idea of what seeking is. They say, "What is seeking, my friends? What is true seeking? Seeking is an attempt to understand the desires of your creator. Seeking is an attempt to understand why you are yourself and how you may express the desire of your creator. There are many upon your planet who seek many things. They seek understanding, but they do not even understand that it is possible to seek the understanding of which I have spoken. And understanding, my friends, of how to express the desire of your creator in every thought and in every deed and in every activity in which you involve yourself. This, my friends, is seeking. This, my friends, is what is necessary for an individual to become aware of if he is to make progress in a direction that he truly desires. Most of the people of your planet at this time are not aware of their true desires. They are not aware of these desires because they have not availed themselves through meditation to this awareness. Avail yourself to your own desires, my friends. Do this through meditation, and you will make the progress that you wish to make. All right, that didn't really quite meet where you were going. You were talking about how, some of the perplexities of the illusion can actually unite us in our confusion, right? Like we see someone else is struggling with something and we find that we are also struggling with that, or vice versa, right?
I mean, I think it kind of ties in a little bit in what in maybe another example of what I was talking about that I didn't mention is like this is all just the creator interacting with itself, right? So I mentioned, I think as we were trying to schedule this, I said, hey, I'm gonna have to reschedule because of an issue with contractors. And I don't know how much I've talked about this on the podcast, but in general, I have distortions related to perfectionism, which I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I'm good now, or on the path to being good. But also, it's interrelated to a rejectance and lack of acceptance for the concept of incompetence, right? And look, contractors make mistakes; it happens. They also don't have necessarily great reputations for competence, right? So I was going through a situation where it was readily obvious that this was an opportunity. So there's first the physical illusion aspect. I want the job to be done correctly by the contractors, right? So then it's like, okay, well then I have to be ultra controlling and micromanaging now because there's been multiple incidents of just basic stuff not being done if I'm not like supervising them, right? But then there's a deeper level of, look, acceptance and rejectance isn't about what you do. I can still supervise them, but let's not have it come from a place of control and anger and frustration. And once again, it's normal to have anger, frustration, and all of that stuff. But the idea is if you're coming to acceptance, those are things to be processed and transitory in a natural and organic way. And so I just took it as whenever I go through Catalyst, I always ask myself, usually at the end of the day, but sometimes in the moment, is this triggering something? I mean, it's always triggering something, but what basic key concept have I been working with in the past few months, years, maybe decades, that this is kind of bringing up, right? And it was obvious that it's bringing up my rejectance of incompetence. And it's not just rejectance of incompetence at others. It's fear of incompetence in myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's intertwined with perfectionism. And I realized, look, everyone makes mistakes. All I really want is a job to be completed correctly. I'm gonna say, hey, let's reschedule to a day where I can be there because I just want to be there. And hey, I'm not saying I'm not upset with you. I just want it to be done right, and I just feel comfortable if I'm there. So let's please reschedule, right? Just being very nice about it, and because I'm not there to like make them better contractors, right? Ultimately, I just want to get the job done, and also do it in a way where I accept everything that is taking place. And to be completely fair, I don't think the contractor's going to listen to this. The contractor I'm working with, he had a lot going on in his life, had a death in the family, stuff like that.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago. So I get it. You're not always focused, but anyway, it was an example of like reality mirroring back a lesson I had been working on for years, right? Maybe decades, maybe past lives. And it's just interesting in that you see it as an opportunity to grow, but and also I see it as opportunity to serve him, right? Because I think a lot of people, it was a pretty basic mistake they made. A lot of other people would have like yelled at him, right? And been like, how could you do this? And I'm just like, hey, let's just go forward and make this work. And maybe afterwards I say, hey, in the future, it's better to have a diagram and give him some constructive advice. But in the moment, maybe just move forward, right? Yeah. So it's interesting how reality mirrors back whatever you're working on or what you could be working on.
Well, that's what's so fantastic about Catalyst is how it, especially when it comes to mind Catalyst, um, in the archetypally, that is a function of the unconscious, right? It that catalyst is the way that I think about it. There's probably something wrong with this, but the way that I think about it in part is that when it's catalyst, it's because your subconscious is like is vibrating in resonance with something that's out there. And it's like
Exactly.
the thing that makes that bothers you is not the thing out there. It's the thing in here that's resonating. But
Right.
all you can see, because if you're not looking within, you won't know that it's something within you that's really bothering you. You'll think it's that thing out there that's bothering you.
Exactly.
And it is bothering you because it's part of one creation. But
Exactly.
but you are in it's a difference between seeing the roots of the phenomenon and seeing the outward manifestation. You can get through the outward manifestation that's all distorted and detailed. You can get back there. But it might be easier just to go directly within, since you know that's where it's going to lead anyway.
Right.
Just take the
Yeah.
shortcut. There's one other thing about service I wanted to mention that comes from a session April 30th, 1974. It's also Hatonn. And I think after this, we can probably wrap it up. So they say the most difficult thing to accept about service is the fact that you cannot give service. So once again, we're getting to paradox contradiction mode, but just follow me. You cannot give service. There is no way to give service. Service, my friends, must be taken. There is a natural law which governs the absolute free will of each developing particle of consciousness in the universe. Each entity upon your planet, my friends, who enjoys physical human consciousness at this time, has a complete universe to himself. This is kind of like what you were saying, that we all have these, like, we're all so separate, we're in our little worlds, right? Has a complete universe to himself through which nothing can come without his expressed approval. Remember, we only get what we desire. That's the whole point. Many, many things seem to come into the universes of each of those entities within the physical, which these entities do not expressly desire. However, my friends, in truth, that which comes into each entity's environment is what he has desired. Nothing else may enter. Therefore, there is no way to give service to an entity. There is only the ability of each entity to request and accept service from another entity. Therefore, my friends, those of you who have begun seeking and are now attempting to learn how to serve may discover more and more the difficulties of service. However, my friends, we may encourage you in the following manner. Consider the tree which produces fruit. The tree spends much time, much love, and much care and all of its energy in producing the edible fruit which it then offers to any who would desire to take the fruit. This is its service, and my friends, it may be that one tree goes through an entire cycle without benefiting any entities, and instead of having been of service, the tree has been unable to give of its fruit. But, my friends, the tree does not become discouraged, for it knows several things. Even with its limited consciousness, it knows that after rest, it will be ready again to be of service, and it knows that even though the fruit withers and drops to the ground, that the seeds within it may produce for many, many years to come other fruit trees and other fruit in an endless amount of service. My friends, what we are attempting to tell you is that it is not possible to know within the physical illusion precisely what your short-term objectives of service may be. That's very, very important right there. This is part of why we get frustrated with our services. We want to see the immediate reflection of the specific thing that we think our services desire to achieve, rather than the more general thing, which is just love, which is just, respect and love and all of these different, distillations of love. The more that we make it this concrete thing, the harder, the more we frustrate ourselves when that concrete visual that we have of what the service should be doing isn't achieved, right?
Absolutely.
However, my friends, it is sufficient to your spiritual advancement that you be ready to serve by abiding within the light of a spiritual consciousness, and that you respond to any request for service, whomever it comes from. The abiding within spirit that you do by constant meditation is of the greatest service. We suggest that you think within yourself of your knowledge of the meaning of the past 5 years of your life. My friends, do the events not come into clearer focus after a longer period of time has detached you from the illusions of the moment? What is meant will occur by the techniques with which you meet each day. You will begin more and more to fill your consciousness with the environment that you truly desire within spiritual consciousness. Do not fear that you will not be of service. Only be ready to be of service, for you surely will be asked if you are ready to serve. And there's really only one other thing I wanted to talk about. February 15th, 2 years later, February 15th, 1976, Hatonn says, "It is never easy to know how to be of service to those about you. And yet, it is all important to be of service, right? To be ready to be of service, to have this readiness that you have like cultivated within yourself. You don't necessarily have to intellectually be able to plan, this is when I'm going to serve. You just need to intellectually maybe discipline yourself so that some service that you can't anticipate that will be needed, you will be ready to act upon. And you'll be able to come from the deepest part of your, the most pure part of yourself when you do it.
Which date was this again?
This is February 15th, 1976. It's not in the notes. It's something I stumbled upon today in my reading.
February 15th was my birthday, but I wasn't born then yet.
Yeah. For there are many, many who are waking from their sleep and now know that there is something that they need to receive. And we say to you, be very, very careful to listen with utmost clarity to what people ask of you and answer according to their needs. We ask that you familiarize yourself not only with the paths that are pleasant and amenable to you, but also with those paths which may not satisfy you, but which seem to be leading towards the one goal, which is the understanding of love. There are many such paths, and each one has been made by those for whom it is the very best path. Rather than attempting to coerce anybody to follow the best path, encourage each person to follow any path. If no path suits the person, encourage the person in new and creative ways, remembering only the goal, that the person begin to seek outside the physical confines for that more which is there. If a person has come to you, he knows that there is more. In whatever you do, be of service. Enlarge that understanding. Never discourage it, whatever way the person may be seeking. This takes compassion and a very gentle spirit. There is nothing more harmful than the person who is sure that there is only one path. We say this to you because it is something that is not easy to see. And yet in the days to come, those about you, when they sense that you know something, will be asking what that is. Do not be a stumbling block to anyone. Know that the Creator is on all paths toward spirit. Only attempt to discourage that seeking which separates man from his creation. That is all that needs to be discouraged. Any loving and unifying direction will end in the Creator. And I think that's probably a good place to leave things. I've been trying to drag it out because I feel like there's so much I haven't like really been able to sort of pull out of these sessions and sort of isolate and be able to show y'all, the listeners and viewers, like just how awesome this is. But I guess that like no matter how many notes I write or whatever, at the end of the day, it's just about, putting together some things that will inspire your seeking, that won't dictate it and won't like give you like all the keys. I don't have them to give. All I have to give really is to share with you my passion for this material. And maybe if you feel that within you too, you'll feel that you have a brother out there, because you do.
No, Jeremy, I always love to see your passion. It really does show through. And I think that last quote was especially beautiful because I felt like it was speaking directly to me, like piercing the veil. And I suspect that it's going to feel that way for some listeners too. That last bit is specifically directed towards a lot of us who are listening right now, and that's just a beautiful thing.
It's one of those areas where when we are exploring ourselves through meditation and we're trying to find a deeper self from which to serve others, we can sort of hone the skill of looking beyond the superficial request for service to the deeper service being requested. I think that is something that actually sometimes the intellect could be a partner in. It's not going to dictate everything, but it can help you understand, is this person am I getting that clarity? Am I hearing what this person is saying, or is my own stuff coming up when I hear this person? And I think they give you a very clear rule, which is that, well, one way that you can always know that you're serving them is that you are encouraging them to expand their concept of themselves and their creator. They know it, they wouldn't be contacting you if this seeking is central to your life. Then you can pretty much expect that most of the people that come into your orbit are there because there's some sort of attraction there, right? At some level, however deep, however mysterious. And so you know that by the mere fact that they're talking to you, that they're in your lives, that it's your job to serve them in at least one way, which is never to discourage their seeking outside of the physical illusion, but to only encourage it and to only discourage things that tend to bring them back into the illusion, that tend to narrow their imagination and narrow their idea of what's possible and what love means, right? These like coarse ways that love is understood by, say, the materialist scientific complex.
Yeah, it's a difficult process. Every individual you come into contact with is different. You have to sometimes you can just plant a seed, right? And
Yeah,
it's very hands off. Other times, people, when they're further along or more actively seeking, you can be more direct. But it's hard. It's hard.
remember it is not possible to know within the physical illusion precisely what your short-term objectives of service may be, right?
Right.
The sort of concrete illusion mediated signposts that give you the idea that you are meeting your target. That is an illusion, though. You don't really know over the long run whether that seed has been planted. But if you have a longer term idea of what service is, if you have a longer term idea of what you are and what the person you're serving, who he or she is, then what it is really, Nithin, is you don't have to be perfectionist about your service. You can
Exactly.
understand that it may not pay off immediately. And that just because it doesn't pay off immediately doesn't mean it wasn't helpful, doesn't mean it wasn't service. And then you can take a little bit of the pressure off yourself and you can serve more from where I think they're trying to get you to serve from, which is this creative part of yourself. A part of yourself that sees all of the problems and the the distance and blockages between people. And instead of seeing it as a hopeless situation, sees it as a problem that just needs creativity. It just needs something that it hasn't been introduced to before. And you are a creator, you are a co creator. Creativity is your middle name. You are there. That is part of creativity, is having the patience and the ingenuity. And that's where I think it gets into like some skills that we are learning through meditation and inward inquiry. Because as we learn to really get down to our real desires, I have a suspicion that we're going to be able to see other people's true desires in the illusion more clearly because we're seeing them more clearly within ourselves.
Oh, I don't think it's a suspicion. I've noticed that in my own personal experience. The
Well,
more,
thanks for confirming.
yeah,
That was a short term confirmation.
I think you've seen it too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think if you're just first starting off in this area, it starts with a suspicion or a curiosity or a supposition that this is possible.
Yeah. No matter how different the topics are that we talk about, they always come back to the same core concepts. For a certain type of person, this podcast must seem so repetitive. But I'm happy to be here repeating it to you. Nithin, thanks for joining me. Did you have any closing thoughts, or has this been long enough?
No, I mean, I think these are great things to talk about. Sometimes these conversations also feel very timely, right? Timely with respect to what we're currently, me personally, is kind of uh going through, or not maybe going through, but just experiencing in our lives, right?
Yeah, same here. Same here. Uh, I think a lot about how can the work setting where I find myself to be just about as alienated as I possibly can be in my life, how that can be a place even where I can express these things. And it has nothing to do with like the specific project or task I'm on. It has to do with how I use that project or task as an opportunity to relate and to relate on deeper and deeper levels. And look, if you can't relate on the deepest level you want to, you accept that. That's okay.
Absolutely.
The illusion gives you that space. All right. Okay, let's wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining us. I really can't speak to the cadence of episodes going forward, but we're going to get as many as we can out. I wouldn't expect anything until after the channeling intensive, though. But thank you for your support. Thank you for joining me, Nithin. And in the meantime, gentle listeners, stay in the love and light.